Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast. This is episode 7, and today we're talking with Sheri Schoch, owner of Yetter Insurance. She's a volunteer with Young Life Tristates, and today we're going to hear about what she does for them and how much she loves volunteering.
Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast with Jen Klein, a certified fundraising executive and philanthropic entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you to make a difference in your community and our world. Jen believes all acts of kindness matter, and this show is designed to help you take pride in your everyday actions of improving the lives of others and making a change in the world. Now, here's Jen.
Hi, Sheri. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jen. It's good to hear from you.
So I understand you're involved with Young Life, and I'm not quite familiar with that nonprofit. Can you tell me more about it?
Young Life is a non-denominational international organization that works with teenagers. Our goal is to let every teenager hear about the God that loves them.
Great. And so you mentioned they're international. How many countries are they in?
At last count, I think it was the high 90s, like 96, 97, but it's growing.
And so what does that look like? Do they go into the schools or do they have their own facilities?
So we have a couple different ways that this works. So at my level, I work with a local chapter. So we work with the local high schools. Some high schools allow us to come on campus, some do not. Now with COVID, we are not allowed on campus because they're not letting volunteers on our local campus. But we go in there or we go to the local coffee shop and have coffee with teens, and we develop relationships with them because they need to know that we care before we can tell them about God. So we let them know that we care about them, what's going on in their life, the struggles, the good times, the best times. We talk to them, hey, what was the best thing that happened this week? What was the worst thing that happened this week? They need to know that there are people in their life that care about who they are. So we developed that relationship. Pre-COVID, we would also do once a week, we would do a club, just a night of organized chaos. We would get together and we would have the kids, we would do some silly games. All of our games are around genuine fun. There's no making fun of someone else. There's no belittling someone else. There's just genuine, the old-fashioned fun. And then at the end of the evening, all of that high chaos winds down and we tell them about a 10-minute club talk that tells them about Jesus and who he was. And it's a short time because many of them don't go to church, so they're not used to listening to sermons. And over time, we're just developing those relationships, letting them know that there are adults that care for them. Then we have the opportunity to take them to camp. So Young Life is also a camping ministry. We have about, I don't remember the count, I think it's 20-some camps around the country. So fortunate for us, one of our camps is only 15 minutes from my house. It's Young Life's Lake Champion. And camp is a week of their summer where they get to go and have kids, have fun. They unplug from their devices. They don't get their cell phones. They don't get their iPads, none of that. That's all handed over. And when they first hear that, they go into shocked panic, like you're taking my world away from me. But the interesting thing is that as time goes through that week, they have so much fun, they forget about it. They're just having a genuine good time. They, at Lake Champion, they can do the boat rides with the tubing. There's a huge pool complex that's new. They can do all kinds of fun things. There's a zip line. There's a ropes course. Just having the time of their life that whole week. And every evening we have a small club talk. So we sing, and sometimes the songs are, high energy songs, like we'll sing Brown Eyed Girl or something like that. And you've got a room of 500 teenagers singing at the top of their lungs, just having a great time. It's so much fun to watch. They have food like you would not believe. This is not your old typical Christian camp food that was really dry and yucky. This is like resort quality food all week. And some of these kids have never had food like this in their lives. They're staying in these luxury cabins that they have no idea. They've never stayed in anything like this before. And the whole week, everything is wrapped around the center fact that we love you, we love Jesus, we want you to hear more about each other. And so that's how we work.
That's amazing. It does sound like good old-fashioned fun, like I used to have when there was no cell phones yet.
Yes. Yep.
And so how do people hear about Young Life? Is it student-led as well? Is it only volunteer-led?
So in general, you have a staff person at the local level. Now, our staff person had gone into a different position, so we're currently in the prospect of hiring for a staff position. But you also have a committee. So I serve on the committee. The committee is a bunch of local adults who have a passion for teenagers and want to help raise the funds, raise the awareness of Young Life in the background. Your staff person works with the committee on that. The staff person also trains our local volunteer leaders. I'm also a volunteer leader because I want teens to know about Jesus. So in 2019, my youngest graduated high school because I said I would not get involved as a volunteer leader until they were out of high school. He graduated in June. I was on volunteer leader by September. So we raise awareness from the committee mostly. So we'll do pre-COVID, we would do banquets every year. We would do golf tournaments, mulch fundraisers. Now, some of that looks different. We're looking into how to do a banquet in a new type of era. So we're looking at doing the banquet called Banquet in a Bag, where we get stuff together about Young Life Tristates and we can present that to different people. Just a way to keep connecting with our donor base and those for whom we're continually talking to. They are people who are praying for us and who are putting their mouth where their money where their mouth is, I guess you could say, saying, hey, yeah, we care about teens as well. We can't do specifically what you're doing on committee or volunteer leader, but we can give you a little bit of money each month to help you do that. So that's how we raise awareness.
That's great. That's right up my alley, Sherie, since I'm a fundraiser. So I love all that stuff. But I know it can feel overwhelming and daunting, and a lot of work goes into fundraising. So
yes, it does.
And you've had to be very flexible this year with the new guidelines. So I can imagine that fundraising has gotten even harder this year.
It has gotten harder. We've tried to be very communicative with our donor base. And sending out newsletters, letting them know what's going on. In the past, we loved doing our banquet. I've been the banquet chair forever, and they are a lot of work to put on, but they're a lot of fun because this is something that we love and we're passionate about, and we love to show other people what we're doing and getting them there. And we'll do some of the fun games and skits with the adults. And it's hilarious to watch the adults get up there doing these games and getting them involved and saying, hey, this is kind of cool what you're doing with the teenagers. Yeah, it is. So how would you like to help support us? Is how we do it.
So you mentioned Young Life is non-denominational. Do you have multiple churches of different faiths, backgrounds that you partner with for Young Life?
That's correct. So we consider ourselves what you call parachurch ministry, meaning we come alongside of the churches. So we have different denominations in our tri-state area that help support Young Life Tristates. I know at the corporate level of Young Life, they have a whole group that also works in conjunction with the Catholic Church as well. In fact, we have a local Catholic deacon that has actually met with the Pope in order to let him know what they were doing with teenagers. And the Pope said, let's keep doing this because we don't want to lose the next generation. The next generation is important. They matter. Let's let them know this. So it's pretty neat to see that aspect.
That's terrific. We've had other guests on the show that have talked about how, God's brotherly love has been an example for them for getting involved with philanthropy. And then we had another guest, MJ Tierney, talk about her Catholic faith and the importance of service that she's learned through her faith. And I'm curious, what aspect of Christ's life do you focus on when sharing to people about the importance of learning from Jesus?
So I like to read about how Jesus would sit with the tax collectors and the sinners. So these were people who were not going to darken the temple because they were not allowed. They were unclean. They were not allowed to come into the temple because of their lifestyle. So Jesus said, well, then I'm going to come to you. And that whole aspect through the Gospels, I mean, that's how you and I learned about Jesus, because he went from the Jewish community and the ministry went into the Gentiles, which is you and I. And because he was willing to step outside of the temple and go to where the people were. So I think that's really important that we get out of our little comfort zones. Sitting in our little pew on Sunday is important. Yes, it's absolutely important. But it's also important to carry that mentality when you leave the door, when you're talking to somebody in your business or you're going different places. You go and you are representing Jesus every place you go. So represent him well.
So it really has to do with Jesus's unconditional love, that everybody matters, and that Jesus enjoys reaching out to all different types of people.
That's correct. And I don't remember if it was something my father actually said or just watching the way my parents lived, but it was along the lines of, we were not saved to sit, we were saved to serve. And I don't know if that exact phrase came, but that was just a mentality. I mean, my parents have been serving people. I mean, our whole life we've seen them do that, through the church, my dad was actually one of the founding members of the local chapter of Young Life Tristates. So it's a lifestyle. It's not just something you do every once in a while. It's a lifestyle choice to serve.
We've heard from a lot of guests previously about how their childhood affected their belief in the importance of service. And it sounds like that's been the same for you as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so how many years have you been involved with Young Life in particular? So
I think I'm getting into my 17th year with Young Life. So I've been on the committee in various positions. I was the committee chair for about 8 years. When my oldest went into a senior year in high school, I stepped back from the chair position because he needed a little more time. But I'm currently the vice chair, the finance chair, and the banquet chair, and I'm still a volunteer leader. And I don't see my stopping doing that until I get called home, because I think it's important.
That's terrific. And so it sounds like you use a variety of the skills that you've been given in your life to help Young Life, such as finance, you mentioned. That's not an easy position to be in.
It's not, but somebody that I know, who you know as well, taught me about the love of numbers and how things work. In fact, your father taught me about Excel spreadsheets, and I utilize that in order to help my committee see where we're going. I always tell them on the committee meeting nights, okay, guys, this is the most fun you're going to have all evening. Look at all these pretty numbers. And so some of the training I've had through different positions has helped me do that.
Yeah, I think you're talking to our guest from a couple episodes ago, John Fisher, who's my father, and he was talking about his love for numbers. So it means a lot to me that my dad was able to help support you in your love of numbers and the way that you've learned to use that skill for Young Life. I want to just take a commercial break. I want to share with my listeners about something that I did so that they can be inspired to be volunteers and donors in their communities to both individuals and nonprofits. So we'll be right back. Let's take a break to talk about a company that I'm passionate about, Stella & Dot. Stella & Dot creates personalized jewelry that boosts your love of life. Stella & Dot is committed to sourcing and producing jewelry and accessories in a legal, ethical, and socially responsible way. Beautify your life and buy you or your loved one a beautiful personalized piece of jewelry. Go to JennKleinPhilia.com for more information. That's JennKleinPhilia.com.
You are the kind of person who wants to improve the lives of others, but you need to take pride in your everyday actions. You Are a Philanthropist believes that every act of goodwill deserves to be recognized as philanthropy. Each individual action you take impacts another's life. Believe that what you do makes a difference. So call yourself a philanthropist and start a ripple effect of generosity that boomerangs back to you. Go to youareaphilanthropist.com/shop. Style your outside to match your inside. Choose a t-shirt, hoodie, or bag to show how much you love giving to others. That's youareaphilanthropist.com/shop.
We're back. I want to thank you again for being here. Today we're talking with Sheri Schoch. She's a volunteer with Young Life Tristates. You mentioned a little bit about your kind of 3 areas that you've been involved with Young Life. And it sounds like, after 17 years of service, you've really committed and you said you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. I'm really impressed by that, for your deep commitment to the mission and to Young Life. And I'm curious about how many hours would you say a week you use of your time to give back to Young Life?
Well, it kind of varies. Pre-COVID, with volunteer leading, we were spending around probably 8 hours a week with a volunteer leader position, going to school events, showing up for the kids and stuff like that. A lot of that now is done through texting and Facebook messaging and stuff like that because we couldn't meet with them in person. My committee meeting we have once a month, that's a couple hours. And then I'm doing the finance stuff on the side. So that's another couple hours a month that we're working on that. It is very different now than it used to be when we would do the banquets. The banquet would easily have 100+ hours put into the work on that because I believe in doing everything well, because when I'm doing things, I'm not doing it for just people. I'm doing it as unto God. And so I believe in doing things well. So every time you have a fundraiser, that bumps up the amount of time you're spending. Now, if you're, January and February are traditionally pretty slow times. Club is not going on, and club can't go on right now because of COVID. But in a normal year, club is not going on January and February because we usually get hit with snow. So everything always gets canceled. But other than that, we're making sure every week that all our leaders had what was necessary. We were doing meals for the kids because one of the great ways to get kids to sit around and just talk is to put some food in front of them. So for a long time, for years, every Thursday night, we were feeding teenagers, sometimes 20, sometimes 30. We had a couple times where we had barbecues of almost 100 teenagers. So it just depends on the season that we're in and what kind of activities are going on at that time.
So is there any cost to the students for camp or for the meals?
So when we did the meals locally, no, we did a kind of like a meal train, and different adults in the community would provide food. When you go to camp, yes, camp does cost money. We do fundraisers to help them raise that money. The money includes the camp for the week, which is 3 really excellent meals a day, transportation to get to the camp. We have Lake Champion is near us in Glens Bay, New York. We have Young Life Saranac, which is up in the Adirondacks. We've gone there. We try to keep things where you can get to in a day, to the camps that you can get to in a day. So we're not going to go to the camps in Florida. But we did one year go to the camp in Virginia, which is Rockbridge. So there is a camp cost, and we try to raise funds, but we try to emphasize to the kids that they shouldn't let the money be the reason that they say no. And if there's a kid that needs to get to camp, that's when the finance chair starts talking to local adults. I've got a kid who they don't have the money. How can you help us get him to camp? And, the local community steps up every time.
That's great. And when I was involved in youth group, we did a lot of service opportunities as well. And I'm curious, what are some of the outcomes of doing Young Life for the children? Do they stay out of trouble? Do they do service opportunities?
So one of the cool aspects is just that having an adult with whom they can communicate. A lot of the kids in this area have parents who had been going into the city to work, so they had no adult that was really pouring into their life, and that makes a difference to them. Something big is going on, they can hop on the phone at any time and talk to a volunteer leader. If it's 2:00 in the morning, then it's 2:00 in the morning. It doesn't matter. If a kid needs you, you show up.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea that volunteers were showing up at 2 a.m. for children. I'm curious, are you able to measure the outcomes of what Young Life has done, or if it's, a personal relationship that kind of affects them for the rest of their life?
I think there's a combination of both. There are different metrics that we send to Young Life headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado, but there are other metrics. For instance, I know a young man who is currently on staff with Young Life in Michigan at their camp out there, which is Timberwolf. And he's on staff there because when he was in high school, there was a Young Life leader that said, "You matter, I care," and kept showing up to his events. His parents weren't, but his Young Life leader was showing up to events, showing up to things that mattered to him. And that mattered enough that when he graduated high school and then got some education under his belt, he went back and he now works full-time for Young Life, serving other kids, letting them know that they matter because there was somebody that said that he mattered to them.
And so it sounds like when you're talking about the importance of how Jesus would relate to people at all different levels of the spectrum of life, it seems like maybe at times society leaves behind the teenagers and doesn't value them as much as we should. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Oh, that's a very fair assessment. We like to undervalue them, and we underappreciate their value to our society. And they're important. They matter. And even at the church level, there are times that, we think of other things as more important than teaching the teenagers, but there are future leaders. There are future leaders in politics and business and the church, and they matter, and they need to learn that they matter, that there's a value to them. Those who don't have a value feel like they're valued, go down some pretty dark roads.
That's a great point. And especially as a young adult, when peer pressure and involvement of parents and being just kind of self-conscious of who you are, who you're becoming, it sounds like those ages are really crucial for, supporting those years.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And so, what would you say to our listeners who are either thinking about getting involved in Young Life or thinking about how they want to give back to society? What would you say to them to inspire them to get involved?
We are not saved to sit. We are saved to serve. If you're interested in Young Life, you can go to younglife.org and you can look at what the ministry entails. You can search for a local chapter to see if there is Young Life in your local high schools. Our goal is to reach every high school in the country. We have a little ways to go on that, but we are in every state in the country. And we are working hard to just be a presence, a positive presence. So check out the website so you can see if there's a local chapter for that, but also get up, get moving.
Awesome. And so I'm curious, how would a new Young Life chapter start? Does someone contact the headquarters and say, I'd really like to start one in my public school? Can you help me do that? How do you get a staff member on board?
Right. So the organization is broken down. I'm in a local area, but above me is the region. So for instance, and this would include where you live, Jen, we're in the greater Northeast region, which geographically covers, except for Metro New York and that tri-state area, it covers New York State, upstate. We're just this little blip of Pennsylvania because we're not really Metro. So we belong to that. It covers Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine. So you would contact someone in that area. You can start by looking on the web and searching out your local chapter, and they can help point you in the direction you need to go in order to establish it. Once you start looking at that, you start with a committee. You start raising some funds because you have to have some money set up before you can hire a staff person, because you can't hire somebody if you have no money to pay them. And then that staff person starts working with their own donors, because usually they bring their own. So a Young Life staff member is paid by the local area. Now the local area raises their funds, but that staff member also raises some of the funds. So they might have personal donors from like the town they grew up in, or, their parents or stuff like that. They're bringing some money to the table. Then the local committee is raising money so that we have the money to pay that staff person. Workers worth their wages. You can't call them to do all of this work and not take care of them. The Apostle Paul would go into different areas and he would work. He was a tent maker and he would work to support himself while he was ministering to people. So it's a similar setup. So.
Terrific. Yeah, that's so important, is fair wages, especially in the nonprofit world. I am a big proponent of making sure that nonprofits are paying their staff members and employees a fair compensation, because it is typically below what the business standards are, unfortunately. And some people don't see the value in paying staff members of nonprofits fairly.
And one of the things that I appreciate about Young Life is when you're on staff with Young Life, you are given full benefits. And yes, the local area has to help raise the money for that, but that's part of their salary. We take care of them. They also have a retirement plan that's part of that salary package that we put together. So they are, you're not going to be going out and buying a Maserati on that, but you're going to be able to afford living in the area where you're working and volunteering, and you're going to have health benefits and you're going to have retirement, so that we're taking care of you well.
Terrific. And so you mentioned that you spend about 8 hours, or you were spending 8 hours before COVID a week. And I'm curious, what's the minimum involvement you would say that kind of is an entry level volunteer role that someone could do, or, even donate?
At the donate level, you could spend the time going on the website and entering the payment.
Any amount. That's right.
Any amount. I have people who believe in it but don't have a lot of money, and so they give $10, $15 a month. We have people who this is their passion and they're giving a significant amount every month to help raise it. So that's a minimal level. You're giving the treasure of your money. If you're giving the treasure of your time at the committee level, it's we meet once a month for 2 hours, and then we need you on board when we're doing these fundraisers. So depending on what position you are on the committee determines the level of time commitment. But we start you off slow, and then we work you up to working in some of the chair positions.
I like to say that it's infectious. Volunteering is a lot of fun, and there's a lot of personal reward in it. Would you agree?
I would agree, absolutely. We had our committee meeting this past Wednesday evening via Zoom, but one of the neat things is we're all sitting there on Zoom. We've got our pages up, our view up on the screen, and we're spending a good chunk of time in prayer for one another. And I just think that's so unique that we are spending time involved in the lives of the other committee members, as well as getting involved in the lives of the local teenagers. So we have this sense of community with our committee before we're even going outside the doors to work with teenagers.
Yeah, and John Fisher said the same thing on his episode, that you make friends when you get involved in your community.
That's correct. And the neat thing is, with having the camp near us, only 15 minutes from us, I know a lot of the camp staff there. And now I know camp staff because they move around. We have friends out in California in Young Life. We have friends in Colorado in Young Life. We're helping pack up a couple who are moving to a position in Florida. That's on Saturday. So we'll have friends now down in Florida as well. So it's neat to see the sphere of influence and this sense of community that's really important, but is really missing in today's day and age of technology.
Sure. And so when the kids get together in a room and you're singing Brown Eyed Girl and spending a week together with, kids their age, I'm sure they're building those connections with people from outside of their local school as well.
Absolutely. There's no cliques there. It's just your Young Life Tristates. It's not, well, here's the athletes and here's the musicians and here's this group or that group. No, you're all Young Life Tristates. You're one community there together singing songs, and, they're just enjoying their time.
That's beautiful. And so is there some way that you're connected to the international community? Do you have some sort of annual conference online or in person?
So they, if you're on staff with Young Life, I think it's 5 years, every 5 years have an international conference. They rent out Disney.
Oh.
And everybody flies into Disney.
Oh boy, so that's a lot of fun.
Takes on Disney. I think 2019 is when they did that last. And it's just, they have speakers, there's time to go into the park, and it's just a unique time for everybody to get together. And then I'm sure at the different levels, the camping ministry, they get together every year before camping season starts, I'm sure that the different international groups do the same.
So let me get this straight. You're party people at heart. Just good old-fashioned party people, huh?
Hey, Jen, someday in heaven, we're going to have a big old party. There's a big banquet feast coming, so we're all going to enjoy partying. We're just practicing for that.
That's beautiful. I love it. Sherie, is there any final parting words you'd like to say to our listeners about what they need to know about Young Life, what they need to know about volunteering?
Sure. If you want to learn more about Young Life, feel free to check out younglife.org. It'll allow you to learn about the camping side, your local side, international. And do your research and check all of that information out, and then get off of your seat, get moving, and let's see what we can do together.
Beautiful. Sherie, thanks so much for sharing your passion. Thank you for sharing about Young Life. I am thrilled to hear about the impact you're having on teenagers and how important it is, especially today when children are so isolated, and being able to get that phone call in the middle of the night and somebody answering when they're feeling so alone and desperate and needing that personal connection and love. It's a beautiful thing what you're doing. I thank you for your service, and I look forward to hearing more over time about Young Life.
Thank you for having me today, Jen.
Have a great day. This year, I lost weight through a nutrition program called Arbonne International. Arbonne uses products that are good for your body and eliminate 2,000 toxins. They have nutrition and skincare products to help your body feel the best. More importantly, why I'm talking with you about this today is because they're certified B Corp, which means they put people, planet, and purpose over profit. They donate and created a foundation called the Flourish Foundation that gives to children's mental health programs all over the world. If you'd like to hear more about Arbonne and how it can help you feel your best self and you can feel good about supporting, go to JennKleinPhilia.com. That's JennKleinPhilia.com.